Hey, fellow true crimers. I am your host, Alicia Cherie, and I'm so excited that you found me today. And we're going to go over the case of Timothy Ferguson. I am a little frustrated because this is now like my third time making this episode. I don't know what's going on with my podcast, but it's just not even like saving them. So I'm a little frustrated, but that's life. And so we're going to just carry on, try to carry on. So, again, thank you for being here with me today. I have been really wanting to do a podcast for quite a while now. So, this is really exciting for me, even with all of the frustrations. So, again, I'm your host, Alicia, and welcome to Brewing Murder and Mystery, where we combine my favorite things like coffee, murder, mystery, all things weird, and we're going to just jump right into it. So, today I'm going to give you a little bit of a sensitive topic warning. If you have a hard time handling anything about minor children with abuse and neglect, then this is not the episode for you, and that's okay. Take care of your mental health, and I'm sure I'll catch you on another episode. We're going to start off talking about Chandra Vander Ark. So, this is a pretty recent case, so you might have heard some snippets of it, especially if you are in the true crime scene. And we are going to be confused together about the reasoning that this woman has in her life and why she does the things that she does. Chandra Vander Ark, 44 years old, is a resident of Norton Shore, Michigan. She was the mother to 5 children who 2 of them have already either been adults and out of the house or just don't live with her, but, from all accounts I gather that they've already moved out, and her 3rd born, Paul, is 19 years old, who lives in the home with Chandra at the time of this case, along with a 7-year-old who we are calling G. We're not gonna use his name. I'm all for privacy of minor children, and because it doesn't appear that there was any abuse involved in G, he's just going to be mentioned for the little snippets just for some context. But other than that, we're just gonna leave him alone, and hopefully he can get his life on track and nobody goes out of their way to just be, I don't know, weird towards him. But Chandra, by all accounts, basically seemed to be really smart, at least on paper. From 2018 to 2021, she attended Western Michigan University for a law degree. She was a treasurer, a senator, a wellness liaison, and was on the budget committee for the Michigan Bar Association. Chandra was even honored with a Leadership Achievement Award. If it isn't impressive enough, she graduated second in her class of law school and she passed the bar on the first try with 182 out of 200. That's pretty impressive. I hear that some attorneys have to take that test multiple times even just to pass it. She immediately became employed as a law clerk with a Judge Annette Smedley. So, on all accounts, she was super intelligent. But no, no, no. The whole reason she was even in Michigan in the first place was because she had divorced her ex-husband and under the watchful eye of child services in Oklahoma. So she fled to Michigan to basically get out of reach. As far as Shanda's upbringing, we don't really know much about her. We don't know like who her parents are or what that situation was like. I just really couldn't find anything on her. But we know as of now, Chandra is married to her current husband, Adam. Chandra's ex-husband in Oklahoma, who had their son Timothy, apparently gave her a call and was like, Timothy's just too much. I can't really handle him anymore. You take him. So Chandra decided that she would take Timothy. And that moment, that decision ended up becoming a torturous roller coaster ride of events for poor Timothy. In January of 2022, Adam suffered a stroke and ended up actually having to move in with his parents. Chandra could not take care of him, and with her working, he just needed supervision constantly and care constantly. So I guess they decided that the best opportunities would be that he just moved in with his parents. So thankfully, she had Paul there because Paul was an adult and he had a job at Applebee's and he would be able to help financially contribute to their household situation. So Chandra worked during the daytime and Paul would work either the afternoon or the night shift. And then this way they could kind of go back and forth. One could watch the children while the other one worked, and then vice versa. So basically, becoming a second parent when Shonda was away, younger man Paul, who was possibly had some unhealthy desires to please his mother, would end up basically doing whatever that she asked of him, even if those things were abusive to his brother Timothy. I have very little information on Paul also. This will basically be a theme of this case is just finding information on the backgrounds of these people is like pulling teeth. So, Paul's dad living in Oklahoma during the time that Timothy was, but Paul wasn't there. And I'm not really sure if he graduated or how his upbringing was, but after watching some of these videos about him, I'm not convinced that he is a little bit lower on the IQ standards, and that would then lead to him being easily manipulated. Now, don't get me wrong, this is in no way my excusing any of his actions nor making fun of anybody with possibly a lower IQ or a disability. I just want to point this out to show that maybe the lack of judgment on his part could have just been based off of the fact that he really couldn't mentally think things all the way through, or that he was just easily manipulated. So, Timothy is sent to live with Chandra in May of 2021. Now, Timothy was said to be on the autism spectrum. And so he was verbal, but he did have sensitivities to loud noises. And he seemed to be more of a high functioning autistic person. One thing that stands out to me about this case is that you cannot find a single photo of Timothy except when he was much younger. And we'll find out that Shonda actually refused to take photos of him within the last 6 months of his life. And we'll get to why. So, on a side note, Chandra had a YouTube channel that kind of focused on training service dogs. It was called Law Clerks Through Service Dogs and Training. You can go look it up. It was kind of hard to find, but honestly, the channel's pretty meh. And I wasn't very entertained by it. It gave me a whole like ick vibe. She has a GoFundMe account that basically is her just wanting money to purchase dogs. But I don't know. It could just be me because I already was tainted knowing the things that I know. I just didn't want to invest a whole lot of time looking at her page. But, anyways, back to Timothy. So, his autism, I guess he was diagnosed with all of these situation issues in Oklahoma. So, when he came to live with Chandra, he ended up having this giant bag of medications. Now, being that I have children who were in the foster care system, I know this all too well. I don't know if it's standard practice, but it just seems like they just want to medicate the problems away. But sometimes I'm sure some of these medications are actually necessary. But Chandra mentioned that these medications knocked her son out and he was like a zombie. She even said that these medications were terrifying to her to see him in such a zombie state. I personally have experience with that, and it can be pretty terrifying when you think that you have basically killed your child for giving them the dose that was prescribed on the medication bottle. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with that situation anymore, but Chandra seemed it's just interesting. So she claims that she did not like this, but then when the medication ran out, she just didn't get anything refilled. So, why did she not get anything refilled? Probably not for the reason you think. Not because she was concerned and she didn't want her son on these heavy medications, but because she didn't have any insurance. And asking the ex husband, apparently he refused to give her that. And that was the end of that. Apparently, she didn't put any effort in the 2 years that she had Timothy to attempt to get him any medical treatment, be seen by medical, and her claim was just she didn't have his insurance, which already puts a red flag in my mind. If this boy would have broke his arm or fallen down, would she just have not taken him to the doctor in the we didn't have any insurance? Does she not know that legally they still have to treat you in the ER? You could take him to the doctor, to hospitals. They have programs. She was working for a law agency. So, on all accounts, not very smart of somebody who apparently is very smart. On top of that, she did not put him into school. She claims that the public school that he attended in Oklahoma said that he broke a tablet, and therefore, because they had not received the money to purchase a new tablet or replacement tablet, that they were going to hold on to the records and transcripts. Now, I don't know if that's a thing, but you could still enroll him in your local public school. Again, as somebody who has had children from the foster care system, I have had to enroll them in schools, and we didn't have paperwork right away. Schools are very understanding. They work with you. They will call the previous schools themselves. It was just an excuse. So she claimed that she decided to homeschool him. Now, the homeschooling started off where he would get a tablet, he would work through the assignment, but then later he lost privileges with the tablet and it turned into she would just print him off worksheets that he was supposed to do. I think it was just an excuse. I don't think he was doing anything. But but here we're going to get on to where Chandra really becomes the newest villain of our story and will probably become one of those many infamous mothers that America just hates. Just hates. I'm not sure in all of this what Timothy did that was so bad, but Chandra had it out for her son. This poor child had become her scapegoat for all of her wrath. After Adam's stroke, as far as we know, this could have been happening prior to that, but at least we know after his stroke, that's when Chandra really just saw red every time she looked at Timothy. So with her not taking him to the doctor, him running out of medication, and she decides to homeschool him, this consists of him letting him basically just sit downstairs in his small room. Now let's talk about the small room, which the prosecuting attorney actually said was deemed to be a demented version of Harry Potter. Although there was an appearance that Timothy had a bunk bed type situation in the basement, he actually was kept in this small closet that they deemed the small room. Now, this small room consisted of a mattress with a blue tarp and a random Amazon box. I'm not sure what the box was used for. I don't know, maybe that was his one and only toy, but we find out that he wasn't even allowed to play with things. So I don't know what the box is about. Maybe it's completely irrelevant and was in there for just some random reason, but those were the items that were consisted in this small room. Timothy was only allowed to leave the small room with permission, and it was locked so that he could not get out of it. When he had to use the bathroom, he was allotted 1 minute for urination, 2 minutes for a bowel movement. Now, I don't know about you, but I spend more than 1 to 2 minutes in the bathroom. Yeah, so I'm probably sitting there texting, but still, the point being is that we all spend more than 2 minutes in the bathroom. And when you've got children, it would automatically lead to accidents if they're not allowed to finish or even maybe not even allowed to go to the bathroom in the first place. So, of course, this would lead to accidents, hence the blue tarp. So, I don't know what it is about parents that get on these control rampages, but they always seem to have a few things in common. And one of them seems to be the control over the bathroom situation. Now, I don't know what that's about, but leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think. On top of the control of the bathroom, Chandra decided that her main form of torture was going to literally be starvation. She tells Paul Timothy's only allowed to have bread with hot sauce on it and rice for calories, but that she doesn't want him to enjoy his food. So therefore, that's what the hot sauce is for. This hot sauce was called Elijah's Extreme Regret, Carolina Reapers, and Trinidad Scorpions, which are the two hottest peppers in the world. Not only was Chandra out to starve him, she wanted him to feel pain when he ate as well. So Timothy, of course, would get caught randomly sneaking food. He was starving to death. This would be a natural fight, survival, flight type situation. But when Timothy was caught sneaking food, or misbehaving, there was punishments. Some of these punishments consisted of doing wall squats. If you don't know what a wall squat is, it's basically where you put your back against the wall, you slide down to where you're in a sitting position as if you're sitting on a chair, except there's no chair. And trust me, anybody who has had this on their workout routine knows that these are not an easy task. But he was expected to do this for hours at a time. I don't even think I can do this for minutes at a time. But there he was, instructed to do these things. And if he complained, then he would just have this hot sauce poured directly down his throat. Or Chandler would instruct Paul to dump freezing cold water onto Timothy. Like cruel and unusual punishment at its finest. One morning, Timothy had urinated in his small room, and when Paul was instructed to wake him up, Paul sent an angry text message to Chandra about Timothy's accident. But Chandler instructed Paul to make Timothy clean it up on his own and place him into a cold shower, which was apparently the purpose of the shower was to clean himself, but it had to be cold because that was the punishment. And so then he was instructed after all that, because that wasn't enough of a punishment, he had to clean the garage with no clothes from the waist down, in which she's basically said, because she didn't want to have to clean up urine pants. Yeah, that makes total sense. That, my kid's peeing himself, so no pants for you at 15. How degrading. Now, while all these punishments were going on, Chandra decided that this wasn't enough of a punishment for him. So she had Timothy not only do these horrible things, she had made it up in her mind that Timothy and her were at war for some reason, and that he was not going to win this apparent war that they were at. But Timothy wasn't at war with his mother. Timothy was just trying to survive. So she started having Paul put Timothy in ice baths. This was to make Timothy uncomfortable. In fact, she actually said she wanted him to be as uncomfortable as possible. Timothy was not allowed to sit in a position for too long because Chandra thought that meant that Timothy was getting comfortable. And so she decided that Timothy would not be allowed to sleep either. Even prisoners of war are not treated this way. Yet for some reason, she felt that this was okay punishment for her own flesh and blood. Because she didn't want him to have any comforts whatsoever, she decided that the next best thing would be to put cameras all over the house, consisting of a camera in his small room and in the bathroom so that she could watch him. Now, there's many text messages between her and Paul basically saying to put him in these ice baths, make him shower without a shower curtain. I mean, he's already on a timer for using the toilet. How degrading. Like, I just keep thinking, how degrading, because he had to urinate, have bowel movements, shower, all knowing that his mom is sitting there watching him, or his brother Paul is sitting there watching him to make sure he's not comfortable. I don't even think my mind can wrap around that kind of thought process. I mean, I guess it's good. If I understood, I'd probably be like, "Oh, that makes sense." So there's some kind of humanity, like moral compass that I still have that makes me not be able to process that information. So that I am thankful for. Timothy had these cameras and then motion sensors and alarms placed in the bathroom, in the small room, and on the stairs from the basement leading up so that he could not leave without permission. Of course, if you remember, he was autistic, so some of these alarms that would go off would actually hurt his ears. And Chandra said that those were to make sure that he knew everybody in the house knew when he moved. But I really believe that it was just another form of torture for him because he didn't like loud noises. Oh my goodness, this woman. When Timothy was allowed to be left alone in his small room, which, let's face it, it was a prison and he was not allowed to be left alone, he was locked in there. He was told to place his hands above his head and he had to keep them there for hours. This was so that he could not fall asleep or get comfortable. And I just don't know what the end goal here was. Like, what was like, did, uh, 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 like, that's my thought. My brain, when I try to think about this case, just like starts glitching out because I don't understand. Did she assume that he was just going to start behaving? Did she assume that he was just going to, like, I don't know. Like, what was the point of all of these things? Well, he was instructed to sit there with his hands 4 hours. If they noticed him falling asleep on the cameras or getting comfortable, then Paul was instructed to go to the small room and dump cold ice water on Timothy, or just place him in an ice bath altogether. There was even text messages about turning the AC up while G and Paul could wrap themselves in blankets to stay warm. But if you remember, Timothy was not even allowed to have clothes on most of the time, plus placed in cold water, plus having cold water splashed on him. So he would have been freezing, and so uncomfortable. On days where this was not enough of a punishment, Chandra would then have Timothy run up and down stairs to basically bring him to full exhaustion. And Paul would chase him to make sure that Timothy did this in a timely, quick manner. Just no breaks for poor Timothy. My heart breaks just saying that. One day while Chandra was at work, Paul texted her to let her know that Timothy had eaten the crust off a burger. I'm not even sure what the crust off a burger entails, but when he was explaining this to Chandra, her response was that Paul needed to go make Timothy throw up. So he was instructed to put his fingers down Timothy's throat until he threw up this little bit of food. Timothy ended up getting so skinny during this point that at one time Paul did take photos of Timothy's legs, sending it to Chandra to show her, saying, I think we should actually feed him now. To which Chandra replies, I see what you mean. Give him some bread. Like, your child is literally dying and your thought process, and give him some bread. Yeah, he'll be fine. Give him some bread. I just can't with this woman. I just can't. I mean, this boy is literally surviving off of bread and hot sauce and like a cup of rice for months. Talk about malnutrition. There's no way you could survive long term off of that. There's no way. And as smart as Chandra is supposed to be, you would think that she would know that. So Paul would repeatedly be left in charge of Timothy and carry out these horrendous orders from Chandra. And text messages between them even reviewed that Timothy was struggling to walk and talk, to which both Paul and Chandra believed that Timothy was faking. So they would call him a liar, they would call him names, and then they would do things like take hot pizza rolls, hold them in front of his nose, wave them around, and if he responded, they would basically say, see, you're a liar. You're faking it. The boy is literally dying of starvation. Of course, he's going to want to reach out, bite. He's gonna anything. I mean, I'm surprised that the boy didn't get caught eating his mattress out of literally like wild animal. I again, I have no words. What an absolute nightmare that the situation would have been. I can't imagine knowing that this is your family, your own mother, your own brother, the people who are supposed to love you, supposed to care about you, and this is how they're treating you. No care, no remorse, nothing. Timothy actually got so malnutritioned that she told Paul she didn't want G to be able to see him. Remember, a 7-year-old boy lives in this house? So Timothy got so bad that G was not allowed to see him. So Timothy got locked in the small room, locked in the bathroom where G could not witness what was going on. But G was not the only one that Chandra didn't want seeing Timothy. Timothy had not been outside of the house for months. In fact, he hadn't even really been allowed outside of the basement unless for punishments, such as cleaning up the garage, cleaning the kitchen, walking the dog in the backyard, or running up the stairs. But he had to do these pretty much naked, at least from the waist down, because even wearing clothing, that was like a reward. Like, you don't get to wear clothes. And so this poor boy was in prison. He was in prison. So when Chandra's mother-in-law would come to pick up G, which I'm assuming were for visitations, maybe it's just because she was the grandmother, maybe she was taking them to see his father who had had the stroke. Chandra had her mother-in-law on her phone plan. This meant she could track the phone. So she would track the phone to see how close she was to the house, and she would race home from her job to beat her home so that she could have G standing outside in his clean clothes, ready to go to grandma's, and that so grandma couldn't go inside and see how bad Timothy had gotten. So on July 5th, Paul texts Chandra. He says he's fed up with Timothy. Timothy. Oh, sorry. He says that he is fed up with Timothy and that he's ready to beat him from an inch of his life. Chandra tells Paul to just calm down, place him in the ice bath. He's not going to get away with whatever it is that he's done this time, but she doesn't want Paul at least physically harming him. So doing as he was told, Paul put Timothy in an ice bath. Timothy could barely walk and was even stopped talking at this point, to which Paul suggests that he's faking it again, and Chandra chimes in that he is probably faking it, probably just trying to make them feel bad. What is the thought process there that your child is acting in such a way because they want you to just feel bad? But for whatever reason, they still at least told themselves that he was faking it. And Paul, who needed to be at work at Applebee's but couldn't get there because his transportation that he normally used of his e-bike had broken down. So he calls work, explains he's going to be late because he has to wait for Chandra to get him and drive him over there. So Timothy remains in the bathtub where Chandra instructs Paul from the time of 2 p.m. till 6 p.m. to keep adding ice and cold water to the tub from 2 to 6 p.m. And she says things like, why is he staring off into space? He must be getting comfortable. Splash him with water. And when that didn't work, he would try the pizza roll near the mouth. And when that didn't work, he would just add more water. Finally, Chandra texts Paul with the horrific idea that if the cold water and the pizza roll isn't working, maybe they should put some hot sauce on his down below. Thankfully to this, Paul finally decides that his moral compass is turned on and this is one step too far. So thankfully, this didn't happen. But could you imagine? Have you ever in your life sat there and thought, I don't like this human being so much that I want to put hot sauce on their... I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. More, I don't understand. I just don't get it. Chandra gets home. She texts Paula. She just wants him to run and jump into her car to take him off to work. So Chandra does so, where Paul leaves Timothy alone in the bathtub. And then when Chandra gets home, she doesn't even bother to check on Timothy. She just goes about her normal routine, I guess, whatever that consisted of. And when she finally checks in on Timothy, she notices him gasping for air. So she goes down to the tub, pulls him out, basically flings him into the small room as if he's a chunk of meat, and then decides that she's going to hold her hand over his mouth while he's gasping for air, saying, "You don't need to breathe like that," and holds her hand over his mouth until he starts breathing through her nose. And then she insults him one last time, calling him a dummy. Chandra leaves the room. Timothy takes his last breath and dies alone in the basement closet on July 6th, 2022. Paul gets home and doesn't check on Timothy, and he's later summoned up by his mother to come help her because Timothy is found not breathing. Paul asks if they should call 911, to which Chandra replies, no, not yet. Of course she can't call yet. She gotta get her story straight. So they dress him, put Paul's belt on his body because these clothes are literally engulfing him. And then they decide to call 911 with the instructions that Chandra tells Paul they're going to claim Timothy was so upset by Adam's stroke that he went on a hunger strike. Feeling clever, they place their call to 911. When police arrive, Chandra is playing her part as the disgruntled, distressed mother, and she is crying. But police immediately are tipped off that something is seriously wrong. In the kitchen, they find the pantry, the freezer, and the fridge all have locks on them. There's cameras in really random places, like the bathroom. I know that in today's age that there's a lot more people that have cameras in their home. I mean, I even have cameras in my home, but not in the bathroom. The bathroom's like that one place of like pure privacy. Like, and yet here's a bathroom motion sensor camera with no curtain on the shower. Red flag. Not only that, they find zip ties, a pair of basically police grade handcuffs, hot sauce in the bathroom. I don't know about you, but those are not normal bathroom items for me. If they are for you, I don't want to know why they're there. But for them, that was not normal. That was very unusual to see that. Timothy's body had also showed signs of rigor mortis. So, how long had this child been deceased? He was wearing a black hoodie, blue jeans, and Paul's belt, which, when they lifted up the sweatshirt, they noticed that this poor child was severely malnutritioned. So police immediately start getting a search warrant, and their investigation is full force. Now, here's the details so that you understand how bad this has gotten. The average 15-year-old is around 68 inches tall and between the weight of 112 to 190 pounds. I know that's a really big scale, but there are some larger 14-year-olds and some smaller 15-year-olds and some smaller 15-year-olds. Timothy was 132 pounds when he came to live with Chandra. At the time of death, Timothy was the average height of a 15-year-old, but get this, he only weighed 69 pounds. Just for reference, my 11-year-old daughter weighs 71 pounds. So his ultimate cause of death was starvation and hypothermia. Now, of course, this had the morticians really confused because if you remember, this is July 6th. How does a 15-year-old boy die of hypothermia in the middle of summer? So when the body gets into starvation mode, it starts to eat its fat and it causes the fat cells to turn into energy. But once the fat cells are gone and the body actually starts eating and attacking the muscle, this will lead the person to weakness and cause the body to not work correctly, such as limping when walking, and the body goes into atrophy. So this is a major red flag to police. Mom is claiming Timothy is on a hunger strike, but I mean, seriously, I have 3 teenage boys. They don't ever stop eating. I've never met a single boy who's gone on a hunger strike. That doesn't mean that there's not someone out there, but that's definitely not a common thing for teenage boys. So Sandra also claimed that Timothy loved hot sauce. That's so strange that it was in the bathroom, but I mean, come on, kids are weird, right? So, of course, my son just randomly eats hot sauce alone in the bathroom. But thankfully, the police were not buying what she was selling. Chandra was arrested and taken into custody, and Paul, within just a short time, posts a video that seems completely like it's just any other day. He basically is heard saying, "Hey, if you haven't heard, my brother's died, my mom's in jail, but we're doing fine," as he pets the dog. It was like, okay, Paul, that's weird. But Paul is also later arrested and charged with first-degree child abuse, to which he pleads guilty, and Chandra was eventually charged with first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. During the trial, you can hear the many text message exchanges between the two, and their hatred of poor Timothy just like oozes over like a poison. It is so sad. But the funny thing, the irony of this whole situation is that I guess her defense team decided that playing dumb was going to be their route, but they started off the trial by going over how incredibly smart she was. I think right then and there I would have just fired my attorney, because how are you going to pull off my client is so smart and then yet she doesn't know anything. His whole entire statement was that she did not realize her actions were going to lead to this conclusion. Did you just hear my eyes roll? Because I don't think they could have rolled any louder. Like, please, you passed the bar with almost a perfect score and you don't know that not feeding a child will lead to this conclusion? I there goes my brain on like pause. I just oh, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. The very fact that she testified in her own case, I think, was her own nail in the coffin, because she gets up there and conveniently can't remember anything that she did to her son, but then yet is caught in the middle of saying basically a recipe for a copycat frappuccino that she just loves so much that you can buy at Walmart. But all those horrible things to her son, just don't remember any of them. What an absolute shame. How convenient for you. Paul also gets on and testifies against his mother, which just is more incriminating, because he clearly says that although he takes responsibility for doing the things he did, he was instructed by Chandra the entire time. So, super smart. They also try to get away with this plea that she's basically a dissociating, but the prosecutor's like, no, no, no. She can't do the sanity plea. You have no doctor backing you up. And in fact, we have a doctor who's met with her that is willing to take the stand and say that she's totally fine. So then that turns into, oh, I have PTSD because of how horrible Timothy was to me. And everything that happened was Paul's fault. So she sits on the stand and throws her two boys under the bus. It couldn't possibly have been her. She doesn't remember anything. And then she has the audacity to pretend like she's having a panic attack and throwing up at the sight of her son's photos and text messages that were exchanged between her and Paul. The other really annoying thing to me was that while I watched her, there was times where they were reading these horrific things that had happened to Timothy, and she's over there smacking on gum like a goat chewing on cud. Like, she couldn't be bothered. If you had really forgotten all these horrible things and you were hearing them for the first time, your mouth would be on the floor wondering how you could have done such horrible things if you had literally left your body and you had no idea what you had been doing. And how could she have held down a job in a law office if she couldn't remember things under pressure? So, of course, the jury was not buying it. They didn't even take much time to come back with a guilty verdict. Thank you so much. But sad Timothy, my heart goes out to him. We have no pictures to show you, which is probably good because I don't think I could handle seeing them anyways. But it really gives me those sad dog vibes. I know that might be a weird correlation, but when you see those videos of these malnutrition dogs that can barely walk, somebody comes and rescues them and they have to scoop them up. That's what I imagine Timothy's body is like. You can just see the ribs, you can just see the spine, and it's just horrific and heartbreaking. And knowing that he went through such a horrific 2 years of life, with the last 6 months just being complete hellish and dying alone, the only relief that I get from this is knowing that he is not in pain. And I can't wait to hear what her sentencing is going to be. I can't wait. I can't wait. Oh, so the undoing to her case is basically the fact that she texted Paul everything, and they have these cameras and all this evidence. I mean, there was so much evidence stacked against her in this case that it was just an open and shut case, in my opinion, which also proves that she knew that too, because she didn't even bother showing up to hear the verdict. What does that say? As far as Paul goes, he did plead guilty. I have not heard anything about his case and what he's actually going to be, what his actual sentencing will be. But like I said, I don't excuse what Paul did, but it was easy after watching him to kind of get this feeling that he was easily manipulated and that maybe he was in fear of his own life. Maybe he thought if he didn't do the things that she requested of him, that she would do those things to him. We don't know what his life was like before Timothy moved in with them, but I am glad to see that he just went ahead and pled guilty. So that is the poor, tragic case of Timothy Ferguson. And I hope that he is in a better place and that people like her are just convicted as easily as this case, because I don't know what it is, but I do not have any sympathy for moms who go after their kids. But thanks for listening. I'm so glad that you were here for my very first ever podcast. Again, this is Brewing Murder and Mystery. Until next time, have a safe and wonderful week.